Good morning, good evening, good night. I don't know where you are in the world, but hello, my name is William James. I'm the host of the Bald Book Geek. Your comments on the Rings of Power have been fascinating. Some of them amazing, some of them terrifying, some of them missing the point completely. But here is a handful of comments that I think bring up great points and discussions. So, let's start the show. Now, this is the first comment. I'm a big Tolkien fan, books, grew up with PJ films. If I'm honest, I don't think this TV show exactly disrespects anything the books, whatever fans think is holy. They aren't going to removing material from the books or anything like that. That is simply adapting his work, and part of the adaptation process naturally influenced by those who is adapting it. The problem is, they're not adapting his work. They've taken the names, the places, and they've removed his work and rewrote it. That is the difference. There is a massive difference between adaptation and rewriting. And this is a very in-name adaptation, and I think the fact that this also kind of contradicts if you're a fan of the films. Then the race card gets played. Tolkien grew up in England that was basically all white people, so I think it's fair that his world and population primarily white people. Today, most English-speaking countries in the West live in diverse communities and naturally think it's weird to see in fiction. But I didn't talk about that. I didn't bring that up. You brought that up. I disagree with certain casting choices, but I do believe best actor for the role. But I do worry about these actors. When it comes to wokeness, I do sort of agree. Generally speaking, we live in a time where companies generally do virtue signal. That's with the intention of increased profits. The problem is they're not getting increased profits. Things are flopping bad. Go woke, go broke, I suppose. But when you go into, you're contradicting your own argument here, and when you say, be it colour, skin, sex, gender, disability, sexuality, whatever, grow up, don't see themselves influenced in their stories, or behind the camera, I openly view it as necessary, even if you think it's shady. The problem with that statement is that they could write something original and do it, but they won't. They've literally taken a work and ripped it apart. That's the difference here. They're not adapting Tolkien's work, they're just basically using a rough plot element and a storyline, and that's it. There's no connection to Tolkien. They've rewritten character backstories. Your comment also contradicts itself here, which I find very fascinating. But contradicting your own argument, which you just said, and you also contradict yourself several times, I feel like the historical context of Tolkien's work is going to get lost in this adaptation, and people don't realise that it is the fundamental backbone of fantasy. And I think the fact that you contradict yourself and the fact that you're trying to reach so hard and bring into my argument, which is not really what I'm talking about here, fascinating. Now, this comment was weird. If modernity is used in a negative context, then you know the arguments are coming from the alt-right. I have a feeling you were calling me alt-right here, which I find fascinating. But also, modernity can be negative and positive, regardless of where it's coming from. You might want to look up the dictionary definition of modernity and use in context of literature and source material. The problem is, Tolkien's work isn't about modernity. It is about the era it was written in. And that is being sacrificed and lost here. But the fact that you go straight to this place in a comment that has very little to do with the actual discussion going on, and given the fact that the crew and the cast use the phrase modernity, I feel like you missed the point completely. But then again, I also think you were trying to call me all right without saying it, which I find fascinating and a little slimy. Now, this comment, I think the show looks great, strongly disagree, liked by the writer of the comment, is a bot. This comment, I have got the exact wording from neutral accounts which either haven't existed very long or seem to have no activity on them, and it's identical, even the full stop, everything, it's identical. The thing is, when I see comments like this, it's obviously a bot, but I think it's quite an interesting one, is that, again, this is not what I was talking about in the video, in any way, shape or form, which ironically, if you say the show looks great, strongly disagree, you're actually disagreeing with the cut. It's a really weird thing. And the bots on this Amazon stuff has been hilarious. I do normally delete them, but I thought this would be quite funny. Now, John A. Douglas, I will confess I've tried and cannot sustain an interest for this book. This was on my Silmarillion. The lore and history of Middle-earth never grabbed me as much. I will say this about the Silmarillion. It can be a difficult read. I find it very easy, but listen to it read. I don't think it's a book that's designed to be read by the reader. It's designed to be listened to. It's designed to be discussed. But there are plenty of novel versions. There's the unfinished tales. There's letters. There's countless versions of this and novelized versions of some of the first age stuff that is great to read. I do understand this, though. But once you get into the lore of Middle-earth and the history and everything around it, you see this really beautiful, rich world, which is quite amazing, to be honest. Now, this is a great comment. Their version, if they truly want a version of their own, and they need to create their own from scratch, not on the back of a dead man, Amazon really screwed themselves on this one. They are narcissists, and of course they'll blame the true fans for its failure. This is a thing that I think you bring up great here. Like, you end up with this weird bubble, and if you dare criticize something, you are labelled, you are the problem, because it didn't. We saw it with Toy Story, we've seen it with Star Wars. You, the fans, are the problem, the people criticising. Gender, sexuality, representation, diversity, all of this stuff, that mental health, whatever, does not shield you from criticism. And you have the right to criticise the media you are consuming and media that you are interested in. Criticism is not the enemy. You just can't. The people that are clapping back, the producers, directors, actors that clap back at the fans, are the toxic ones here, and they really need to check themselves. Now, this comment I found really interesting. Where is all the budget? They built movie sets in New Zealand, they disassembled it, and then they moved it to the UK to finally rebuild it. Besides, it is somewhere in 1 billion total, so that's 2 million per season, divided more per episodes, and you're basically dropping in numbers. There is also what you mentioned, promotion, payment of actors, composers, graphics, and so on. This will be one hell of a mess. 1,800 years or so, compressed into at best a couple of years. It's like Christopher Columbus with Julius Caesar on board the Apollo 13 to get to the moon. This is a very true statement. So I want to do more research into that, and I do find it strange they moved the sets. I do find that a little bit weird. And I find it fascinating that they've kind of hit this weird bubble. I call it a bubble because it's the best description of it. They're compressing everything down. There are characters alive at one point that shouldn't be alive at the same time, which is weird. It genuinely weird in terms of just everything that's going on with this. And I think they're trying to do a more Game of Thrones style socio-political fantasy over the high fantasy of Lord of the Rings. But also, considering they're building a studio for this and the delays into what will be the second season, if that happens, I just have a really odd feeling this show isn't going to go anywhere for a very long time. I get the feeling they'll make the creative decision to end it sooner. Now, this is a good comment. The word ism holds no meaning anymore. It's like the boy who cried wolf. Nobody cares about the word at this point. And that's true. I think the words have become weaponized and overused. How many times do we hear the words ism or white supremacy or transphobic or whatever, to the point that they're applied to things that don't actually work or in context. Words lose power if they are overused, and these words need to be saved for the real people who are like that, not someone criticizing media or having an opinion. There are real people like that, and we're so busy just dealing with the background noise of social media that people forget. And words do lose power, and it's sad that words like this have lost power. So earlier I showed you the bot comment. Here is the reply from someone I know very well, and I think this show looks crap. Strongly disagree. I hate this comment. But you know why? Because it's too simplistic and adds nothing. How does agreeing or disagreeing if a show is good even a good comment? It's nothing you wrote, nothing to add. You just wanted to shoehorn a simple opinion without care for the sake of disagreement and clearly show you don't care about the video contains at all. If you at least gave a reason why it would be more worthwhile reading. But instead you just wanted a blue tick who wanted to be on Amazon's shield with this comment. Truly weak. Yes, it's true. The bot comments have been interesting. The hate comments have been interesting as well, but now I'm very selective. I have intentionally removed certain comments because some people really do open that can of worms. Sometimes you're like, oh hell. Keep commenting. I like your comments. Now, this is a good point as well. At this point, I refuse to even acknowledge that this is anything other than badly written generic fantasy loosely ripped from Tolkien. They can blame me for its failure all they want, and I'll proudly stand up and say yes, I am responsible for hating this attempted desecration of work of a genius like Tolkien. You can't erase Tolkien because he will live on in our hearts long after this show is forgotten by anyone but a bad memory, and that's true. Like the weaponizing of criticism is something I really hate, and they will throw the actors of colour into the firing pit. And I will say this, watching that panel was a disaster, but this comment is so true. I think this show is doomed to be forgotten. I think, even if it's amazing, it could be the next best thing since sliced bread, and Tolkien fans will not engage the show because it's not Tolkien's work on screen, it's just his names.